the Pacific Ocean, July 3rd, 1937.
On the last lap of her magnificent flight round the world by way of the equator, Miss Amelia Earhart was lost in mid-ocean. On the 2,500-mile hop to Howland Island, she was reported missing.
It's one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. Where is the wreckage of Amelia Earhart's plane?
Amelia Earhart vanished on the final leg of her quest to be the first woman to fly around the world. Tonight, there are intriguing new clues about what might have happened to her.
Scientists are now preparing to set sail for the spot where they believe Amelia Earhart disappeared.
Through the years, I've been very fortunate in the type of flying I've done.
CEO Tony Romeo of Deep Sea Vision and his crew first set off in 2023 in search of Amelia Earhart's long-lost Lockheed Electra 10E. They spent months searching for the wrecked plane at a cost of around $15,000 a day, with a $9 million Hugin 6000 submersible that had Doppler, a magnetometer, echo sounder, and side scan sonar. They were only looking for targets between 10 and 30 meters to cut down the search time, within 100 miles of Howland Island. They believed they might have finally solved the mystery after getting back a grainy image from the bottom of the seafloor, 16,000 feet below, in the same shape of a Lockheed Electra 10E. This week, the team released the information we've all been waiting for. After returning to the location to get a much clearer sonar image, they sent the submersible 15,000 feet down to the target, which was located 15 to 16,000 feet below. Unfortunately, the image shows that the target they found was just a rock formation that looked almost exactly like the missing plane in the grainy image. The much clearer image shows, for sure, it is 100% a rock formation. But the team is not done yet. They are continuing to search the seafloor to try and solve the 85-year mystery. They plan to search another 1,500 square miles of ocean floor around Howland Island. The team chose Howland Island because of the evidence. Howland Island is where Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were headed on the day of their disappearance. The Navy ship that was used to guide Earhart into Howland Island received clear transmissions from Earhart. The crew members thought she was right on top of them due to the strength of her signal. They ran out on deck to see if they could spot or hear the plane. They were convinced. Let's go over some of the history for those who aren't familiar with the story. The second attempt began with an unpublicized flight from Oakland to Miami. It was only after they had arrived in Miami when Earhart publicly announced her plans to circumnavigate the globe. The reason for going west to east was because of the trade winds and weather patterns along the planned route. Fred Noonan was Earhart's only crew member. They departed Miami on June 1, 1937, and had numerous stops in South America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia. They arrived at Lae, New Guinea on June 29, 1937. At this stage, about 22,000 miles of the journey had been completed, with 7,000 miles remaining, which would be over the Pacific Ocean. July 2, 1937, at 10 a.m., Earhart and Noonan took off from Lae Airfield in the very heavily loaded Electra. Their intended destination was Howland Island, a very flat sliver of land 6,500 feet long and 1,600 feet wide. 10 feet high, 2,556 miles away. The expected flying time was 20 hours. So accounting for the 2-hour time zone difference between Lae and Howland and crossing of the international date line, the aircraft was expected to arrive at Howland the morning of the next day, July 2nd. The aircraft departed with 1,100 gallons of fuel. At 3 p.m. Lae time, Earhart reported her altitude at 10,000 feet. But that they were reducing altitude due to thick clouds. Around 5 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude at 7,000 feet and a speed of 150 knots. Their last known position report was near the Nukunumu Islands around 800 miles into the flight. In preparation for the trip, the United States Coast Guard had sent the cutter Itasca to the island. The cutter offered to ferry news reporters to the island, but it also had communication and navigation functions. The plan was that the cutter would communicate with Earhart's aircraft via the radio, transmit a radio homing signal so it would make it easy to find Howland Island. Without precise celestial navigation, do radio direction finding if Earhart used her 500 kHz transmitter, and to use her boilers to make a smoke curtain that could be seen all over the horizon. The Electra had radio equipment for communication and navigation, but specific details about the equipment are not clear. There were problems with the RDF equipment during the flight from Brazil to Africa. The RDF equipment did not work, and the RDF station at Darwin expected to be in contact with the Electra, but when she arrived there, she stated that the RDF was not functioning. The problem was a blown fuse. The United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed at Howland Island and tasked to communicate with the Electra and guide them to the island once they arrived in the vicinity. Noonan and Earhart were to do voice communications on 3105 kHz at night and 6210 kHz during the day. There were a series of misunderstandings. The final approach to Howland Island using the radio navigation was not successful. Fred Noonan wrote earlier about problems affecting the accuracy of radio detection finding in navigation. The Electra expected the Itasca to transmit signals that the Electra could use as an RDF beacon to find the ship. In theory, the plane could listen for the signal while rotating the antenna. A sharp minimum indicates that the direction of the beacon. The electric equipment had failed due to a blown fuse earlier, but the fuse was replaced. As the Electra neared Howland, Earhart could hear the transmission from the Itasca on 7,500 kHz. She was unable to determine a minimum, so she could not determine the direction of the Itasca. Earhart was also unable to determine a minimum at Ley. One theory is that Earhart's RDF equipment did not work at 7,500 kHz. Most RDF equipment at the time was not designed to work above 2,000 kHz. When operated above their design frequency, loop antennas lose their directionality. Some sources have noted that Earhart's apparent lack of understanding of her direction-finding equipment, which had been fitted to the aircraft just prior to the flight. Video evidence from Ley during the takeoff suggests that the antenna mounted underneath the fuselage may have been torn off from the fuel-heavy Electra during taxi or takeoff from Ley's grass runway, although no antenna was ever reported to be found at Ley. During Earhart and Noonan's approach to Howland Island, the Itasca received a strong, clear voice transmission from Earhart, identifying as KJQQ, but she was unable to hear voice transmissions from the ship. The voice transmissions from the ship would also be used by the Electra for direction finding, implying that the aircraft's direction finder was not functional. At 2:45 a.m. and just before 5 a.m. on July 2nd, the first two calls were received. They were routine, with reports stating that the weather was cloudy and overcast. The calls were broken up by static, but the aircraft was still a long distance away. 6:14 a.m., another call was received. The aircraft stated that they were within 200 miles. They requested that the ship use its direction finder to provide a bearing for the aircraft. Earhart began whistling in the microphone to provide a continual signal for them to home in on. It was at this moment when the operators on the Itasca realized that their RDF system could not be tuned to the aircraft's 3,105 kHz frequency. Radio man Leo Ballards commented that, "I was sitting there sweating blood because I couldn't do a darn thing about it." A similar call was received at 6:45 a.m. asking for a bearing. Earhart estimated they were 100 miles out. An Itasca radio log at 7:30 to 7:40 a.m. estimates Earhart on Northwest says, "Running out of gas, only half hour left, can't hear us at all. We hear and are sending a 3105 ES. 500, same time constantly." Another log at 7:42 a.m. states, "KHAQQ is calling Itasca. We must be on you but cannot see you. But gas is running low. Been able to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. Earhart's 7:58 a.m. transmission said she could not hear the Itasca. and asked them to send voice signals so she could try to take a radio bearing. The Itasca reported this as being the loudest possible signal. This indicates that Earhart and Noonan were in the immediate area. The Itasca could not send voice at that frequency she asked for. Morse code signals were sent instead. Earhart acknowledged receiving these, but said she was unable to determine their direction. Her last known transmission was at 8:43 a.m. "We are on the line 157337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." A few moments later, she was back on the same frequency, 3105 kilohertz, with the transmission that was logged as questionable. "We were running online north and south." The transmission seemed to imply that her and Noonan believed they had reached Howland Island's charted position. This is incorrect by about 5 nautical miles. At this point, the Itasca used her oil-filled boilers to generate thick black smoke for a period of time. But Earhart and Noonan did not see the smoke. There were scattered clouds at the time, and this may have increased the problems the Electra was having. The clouds cast dark shadows on the ocean surface and may have been almost indistinguishable from the island's very flat profile. It is unknown whether any more radio signals were received after the pair were lost. If there were, it would most likely have been a weak signal. Earhart was on 3105 kilohertz. Deep Sea Vision is still out there, searching the waters around Howland Island today for any evidence of Amelia's missing Lockheed Electra 10E. They had plans to raise the plane and put it on display in the Smithsonian, but unfortunately, for now, the plane is still lost. The news is not the answer we were hoping for. Amelia Earhart's plane is still missing, but maybe, just maybe, Deep Sea Vision will get another hit with their submersible and end the mystery once and for all.